Chapter 4 The Glacier. 2 days later, we reached the snout of the glacier and commenced the long haul to base camp. Here we roped for the first time. Jungle went first as route finder with Shoot, who was taking films of us at some convenient point. With them were 10 porters carrying camera and accessories. Burley and Wish followed. The former was suffering from glacier lassitude, but was expected to acclimatize shortly. Then came Constant and Prone. The latter had developed German measles, but was receiving the best treatment at his own capable hands. The porters were distributed between the various parties. I stayed behind to meditate for a while on the responsibilities of leadership, and so brought up the rear. The glacier was over a mile wide, deeply crevassed, and littered with innumerable blocks of ice, most of them 20 to 30 feet high. The place was a veritable maze. Even the highest peaks were hidden from sight. After some hours' march, I was gratified to see in front of me the film gear fully operational with Shoot at the handle. I left him to pack up his things with the help of his porters and carried on. An hour later I was surprised to see him once more, again turning the camera. I concluded that he had passed me without my noticing, as might easily happen, and was glad to congratulate him on his energy. He looked at me in surprise and swore he had not moved from that spot since setting his camera over an hour ago. I was about to remind him that this was neither the time nor the place for such witticisms, when I was astounded to hear a call from behind. Imagine my amazement when I found that it was Jungle, who instead of being out in front, had evidently dropped behind and had been passed by the rest of us. Following him were a number of porters, in a long straggling line, and then to our mutual bewilderment came Burley and Wish. I must admit, I was completely baffled. It was one of those moments when one doubts one's own sanity. I had, with my own eyes, seen the 4 people who were now with me set out ahead of me. Of these I had passed Shoot, who had nevertheless appeared ahead of me, while the others whom I had not passed at all were now behind me. It was too much to believe that we had passed each other in this complicated way without noticing it. The question was, where were Constant and Prone? It was Shoot who supplied the answer. "Jungle, you fool," he cried, "you've been and gone around in a circle." At once it came clear to me. We were stretched out along the circumference of a circle, everybody following somebody else. Shoot had gone on filming us without bothering to identify us as we passed. We had all gone around twice. If it hadn't been for him, who was the only recognizable feature on our route, we might have gone on all day. Confirmation came shortly afterwards, with the arrival of Constant and Prone. I think they must have been suffering from altitude deafness, for they were shouting at each other as though they were half a mile apart instead of only a rope's length. I congratulated myself on my arrangement of the party. 2 men who could carry a spirited conversation after several hours of hard marching at 15,000 feet were obviously kindred spirits. It was one of the deeper rewards of leadership to find that one's manipulation of the human element had been successful. I decided that the occasion was suitable for a halt, and over a glass of champagne we discussed the reasons for the mistake. I asked all to give their opinion candidly, without regard to the susceptibilities. It is my belief that men are better friends for facing the truth together, and that evasion of any kind leads to distrust in the long run. It was encouraging to hear how they responded to the appeal. Shoot was particularly outspoken, and this, I thought, was a good sign in one who was to be Jungle's constant companion. What none of us could understand was how Jungle, using his compass as he assured us he had done, could have turned through a circle. The problem was solved by Shoot, who made Jungle demonstrate his method. They wandered off together, and soon they too were discussing the matter at the top of their voices. Altitude deafness was, I thought, unusually prevalent that day. When they returned, Shoot gave us the answer. "The silly fool forgot to release the catch on his compass," he told us. "Naturally, it pointed north, whatever direction he took." "It might happen to anyone," I said. "It is my experience that a man supplies his best when he is trusted." Nothing saps a man's confidence in himself so much as mistrust from those over him. It would have been fatal to the expedition to allow Jungle to doubt himself, to say nothing of the effect upon him in later life. I take no credit for my forbearance. Such things are the essence of leadership. Either one has them, or one has not. For this reason I sent Jungle off again after the break, confident he would not make the same mistake twice. Nor did he. After he had been on the go for about 4 hours, I found the party at the edge of a vast crevasse, all except Jungle, who was in it. His compass had directed him to it, but rather than make a long detour in doubtful direction, he had insisted on being lowered into the crevasse, intending to climb up the other side by cutting steps. He had been down for 2 hours, and nobody knew whether he was making progress, for his voice was multiplied by echoes, and reached the surface as undecipherable chorus. For all they knew, he might be completely stuck. It is in such moments of crisis that a man's real character is revealed. The veneer of manners and sophistication which enable him to bluff his way in the civilized world is of no avail to him now. Unless he is the heart of oak, he will show some crack or blemish, some weakness which will betray him and his comrades. I am glad to be able to record that in this emergency, each and all of the party emerged with flying colors. It is perhaps not too much to say that during the final stages of the assault, when things were black as they could be, and only character stood between us and destruction, the confidence engendered by that early incident provided the last ounce of effort which enabled us to win through. Each, of course, met the crisis in his own way. Burley, with the sang-froid of a Napoleon, took the opportunity to recuperate his strength, sapped by glacial lassitude, by taking a nap. Wish was boiling a piece of ice over a Primus stove in order to determine the boiling point of ice. Chute had detached the lens of his camera and was correcting it for the reduced refraction index in the rarefied atmosphere. Constant was improving his knowledge of the language by a shouting contest with the band, and Prone was treating himself for swollen glands, which he suspected to be incipient. The behavior of my companions on these occasions has been, I freely admit it, an example and inspiration to me on more than one occasion when panic threatened. I was both humbled by their calmness and warmed by the confidence which they evidently placed in me, upon whom the responsibility rested. They knew I would not fail them. But time was pressing. If Jungle was to be rescued from his predicament before nightfall, something had to be done, and done quickly. Obviously, someone must go down after him, but who should it be? Thanks to the morning's incident, I had the answer. To Chute, alone, should go the privilege of risking his life for his friend. It speaks volumes for Chute's modesty that he did his best to concede the honor to someone else, but I cannot allow him to forego his real desire, we soon had him dangling on a rope. After he had descended some distance, for he disappeared from sight, and his voice became as incoherent as Jungle's, we lowered away until the rope hung slack, then awaited developments. After some minutes, it dawned on me that we might now have 2 men down the crevasse without being a step further forward. Neither could communicate with us, and we dared not haul on the ropes for fear of injuring them. The situation was desperate. It was Burley who, waking up at this juncture, supplied the solution. "Send down a walkie-talkie," he said. "We carried the blasted things all this way. Let's get some good out of them." It was a brilliant suggestion. Burley, I decided, must have the honor of descending with a radio set. Like Chute, he modestly declined the privilege, but I insisted. Falcone's Texas rye, pretty damn good. Soon he too disappeared from sight. I could have sworn his last words were something about "keep my ready mouth shut in future." But this could not have been the case, unless, of course, it was another of Burley's incomprehensible witticisms. Wish switched on another radio, and we waited breathlessly. Nothing happened. A horrible suspicion came over me. "Is the set in order?" I asked. "How the devil do I know?" said Wish. "Jungle Jungle's the expert. It was true. None of us knew how to use the radio. Jungle was to have instructed us in the meeting in London, but he had been unavoidably absent. There was nothing else for it. Wish must go down. He would get Jungle to write down instructions, which would be pulled up by me on the line, one end of which Wish could take down with him. Down he went, and up in due course came the message. Batteries not yet installed are packed in one of the loads, but Burley does not know which one. Send down champagne. This, I decided, would never do. Some channel of communication had to be opened. I scribbled a message. Please tell me what to do. I wrapped this around the neck of the champagne bottle, tied the line around it, lowered it into the crevasse. I gave them 5 minutes to write a reply, and then hauled up the line. The message read, send down another bottle. I hope I'm not unduly harsh in thinking this an inconsiderate reply. Certainly I might be forgiven for thinking so at the time, but not wishing to appear dictatorial, I did as they requested, sending with the bottle another message. Earnestly, I beg of you to consider my position. All means must be used to extricate you from your predicament. Please advise at the earliest convenience. Back came the following. Yours of even date to hand, Jungle overcome by vertigo. Absolutely imperative you send 4 bottles of champagne immediately, otherwise cannot answer for consequences. This, of course, put the matter in a different light, and I repented my quick judgment. I have since talked the affair over with Totter, who confirms my original opinion that the first message was not quite in the best tradition. But at the time I was anxious to make amends for my unfounded and ungallant suspicion that the request for the second bottle was without justification. And I thereby erred into leniency. That message was justified must certainly be conceded. We, that is Totter and I, questioned only the manner in which it was delivered, which made no acknowledgment of my own difficult position. It is hard for me, who is at least on terra firma, to judge the feelings of those below. Perhaps I have, after all, been unfair to them. If so, I tender a sincere apology. I naturally lost no time in fulfilling the last urgent request, sending with the champagne another appeal for instructions. The next message read, Jungle seized with convulsions, send down prone with 5 bottles. This worried me more than I care to say. It seemed to me that the champagne was the last thing one would prescribe for convulsions. But prone, who, sick as he was, pulled himself together manfully when I read the message to him, seemed almost lively for the first time in weeks, and assured me that it was just the thing. So I sent him down too. I gave them time to talk over the situation and then pulled up the cord. Up came an empty bottle with a message around its neck. Bung ho! At the same moment, strange sounds began to issue from the crevasse. At first I could not believe my ears, but at last I was forced to the conclusion that my comrades were singing. Having some knowledge of British folk tunes, I was able with some degree of certainty to identify the music as Oh My Darling Clementine, although multiplied by echoes it sounded rather like a full choir singing a kind of fugal Clementine. The result was not unpleasing, and I joined my friends, and I rejoiced that my friends had not lost heart, but unless they intended the song as a code message, it was no help to me in my dilemma. I feared that, although they were putting up a brave front, my companions were in a situation of great peril. This also seemed to be the opinion of Constant. They need me down there, he said, and before I realized it, he was about the brave fellow. He had pushed several bottles into his pockets, belayed the rope to an icicle, and was sliding out of sight. Time went by, and as the singing continued, I raised and lowered the line several times, but no message appeared. I was well nigh desperate. 6 human lives depended on my clear thinking and decisive action, but I was completely at a loss. My impulse was to descend the crevasse myself, even if I were to perish with my colleagues, but this would leave us with no means of communication with the surface. The porters had long since settled themselves comfortably on their loads, and were smoking the inevitable pipe of stunk. I could expect no help from that quarter. Or so I thought, but I was to receive a lesson on the invaluable qualities of the Yogastani porter, without whom the expedition could not have been successful. The Bang, whose name, by the way, was Bing, suddenly rose to his feet, and ran across to the crevasse, bringing with him a small but immensely broad and powerful porter. Bung by them. Without a word being spoken, Bung took a hold of one end of the rope and was lowered by Bing into the crevasse. Hardly had the rope gone slack when a piercing whistle sounded from below. Bing at once began to haul in again. You can imagine my astonishment and relief when Bung came safely to the surface, holding Burley by the jacket with his mighty fist. Burley, dangling like a puppet, was happily singing, "Yo heave ho," as well he might. It was too simple. One by one my companions were hauled to the surface, and a cordial reunion took place. I'm not ashamed to admit that I shed quite a tear. Jungle, carried away, no doubt by relief at his narrow escape, although I like to think that some small part of his feeling was genuine affection, thumped me so hard on the back that I fell down. And Wish, who seemed a little light-headed after his ordeal, I apparently thought it the greatest emergency that he should inform me he had measured the depths of the crevasse, which was exactly 153 feet. This seemed to him, for some reason, excruciatingly funny. When all but Constant had been safely restored to terra firma, Bing and Bung went back to their comrades. They had evidently forgotten Constant, who were, perhaps, unable to count up to 7. I went over to them and endeavored to indicate by signs that I wished them to do. I was met with blank scowls. Their meager intelligence was evidently incapable of grasping my meaning. I lined up the rest of the team, leaving a gap in the middle, and pointed to this gap to the crevice, and then went through the motions of lowering and raising the rope and greeting a companion saved from the abyss. All nodded encouragingly. A few even applauded. No one made a move. I went through the whole performance again. This time they took not the slightest notice, and puffed away at their stunk as if everything were normal. The team had clasped each other around the soldiers, and still in line, capered sideways on the ice like a row of chorus girls singing, "Don't put your daughter in the stage, Mrs. Worthington." Poor fellows, they were still slightly hysterical from the effects of their ordeal. I was on the point of unmanly panic when Bing got to his feet, came over to me, leered in the most objectionable fashion into my face, and scratched the palm of one hand with the forefinger of another. He did it in the most deliberate and odious way, as though the act had some exoteric significance. It was horrible. I honestly thought for a moment he was trying to bewitch me. One never knows what goes on in the minds of such primitive people. After all, this was the mysterious East. Who knew what might not happen? The others stopped dancing and gathered around. I appealed to them for advice. What should I do? It was Burley who told me, although how he came to know about it I cannot imagine. "Grease it, old boy," he said. "Grease it." I looked at him in astonishment. What was I to grease, and why? Luckily, Burley took charge. To my amazement, he produced a bogie and offered it to Bing. The latter shook his head and scratched harder at his palm. Burley added another bogie, with the same result. It seemed to me exactly as if they were bargaining over the price of something. Constant has since explained the matter to me. It appears the number 6 is sacred in Yogastani. Every 6th occurrence of a thing is treated in a special way. The 6th day is a day of rest. The 6th son is put to the priesthood. The 6th pipeful of stunk is smoked in honor of one's own grandfather, and so on. The prescribed ritual may, however, be waived provided that a suitable offering is made to the gods. In this particular case, 5 lives have been saved, and the gods had been deprived of the presence of 5 Europeans. To deprive them of a 6th would be the grossest sacrilege, and only a heavy monetary offering could adjust the matter. The bargaining went on for some time. The Bang was evidently a devout person, for he upheld staunchly the rights of his gods. The final figure was bogies 8,000. Payment was made. The Bang went to the crevasse, taking Bung with him, but this move did not appear to be popular with the rest of the boarders, who had been gesticulating and shouting during the bargaining. They now rushed after Bing and Bung, and surrounded them, and everybody began to yell at the top of his voice. The argument went on for some minutes. Evidently the porters were against the rescue, Their superstitious minds were no doubt still uneasy despite the handsome offering. At last, to our great relief, the bang appeared to be getting the upper hand. Soon the hubbub was quieted and to a mild uproar, and the two rescuers forced their way through the mob. In no time at all, Constant was restored to us, none the worse for his adventure except for a distressing lack of hiccups. I now realized. In no time at all, Constant was restored to us, none the worse for his adventure except for a distressing attack of hiccups. I now realized that it was past time to halt for the night, and gave the order to make camp. We turned in a happy and united party. Sometime in the small hours, I awoke with a faint suspicion that there were undercurrents to this episode. Why, for instance, had the dramatic rescue taken place only when it was too late for further marching? I put away such ignoble thoughts at once, and mentioned them only as evidence of the deterioration which sets in at high altitudes due to rarefied atmosphere. Next morning no one was fit to travel. Burley, in reaction to his magnificent effort the day before, had gone down again with glacier lassitude, and Prone was prostrate with a sharp attack of pins and needles. The others complained of glacier depression and pressed Prone to prescribe champagne, but the latter was unfortunately too ill to attend them. I dared not on my own initiative take the responsibility of administering so potent a medicine. I hardly need say that champagne was carried for medicinal purposes only. I was anxious to push on to base camp. We were already behind in our programming. Moreover, we were still on the glacier, and at any moment a crevasse might open beneath our feet, precipitating us into the abyss. I therefore gave the order to strike camp. My companions were hoisted onto the backs of stalwart porters, and even I, feeling somewhat overcome by recent emotional experiences, allowed myself to be transported in the same way. The Bang, who had shown initiative at the crevasse incident, was sent ahead as route finder. The day passed without incident, and I woke at noon to find the vast precipice of North Wall towering above us. We were at base camp.